But another one, every book has its weaknesses, and authors are more aware of the weaknesses of the book than anybody else. So it's not that, certainly it's not that I think criticism of my book is at all incorrect. It's more the opposite, where I kind of think, oh God, and you start flogging yourself for a while.
What have you found most interesting about the reactions you received to the book?
I think for me, what's been fascinating, and I haven't figured out really how I feel about it yet, is that this whole time I was writing this novel, I felt, and I know you said you'd read it, and so I really felt like I was writing a fairly depressing, fairly dark book. It's, got one perspective. The only perspective we get is Sima. Most of it takes place in a basement bra shop, so a bit claustrophobic there, and sad. And I felt like it was this kind of dark, sad book about this woman who was quite alienated from needs, from desires. She'd experienced infertility. She had never forgiven herself. And then this kind of very strange relationship with this young woman, which has aspects of mother love, also aspects of lust and desire and obsession, and the way it changes her. And so this was, to me, a strange, sort of sad book. And for me, the strength of it, I thought, was that it was very much about that it was very internal, and that for a reader who enjoyed that we don't always get books that are so internal in terms of, the way our minds really work with all the things we wouldn't really admit and all of that. And certainly trying to get it published was difficult because I kept hearing from publishers, well, there's people would say, I loved it, but I can't sell it. It's not enough of a page turner, etc. And so what's been really interesting to me is like Entertainment Weekly, right? Like getting a few of these reviews where it's like that I've written this page turner, or friends of friends, people I'm not very close to, writing me and saying like, I loved your book, it was so fun! ! I zipped right through it, I couldn't put it down. And it's just so odd to me because I'm like, really? Was it fun? That still wasn't what I thought it would be. And then it's got the pink cover, and, it's sort of being, because of the bra shop, there's definitely been an attempt to market it as chick lit. And I've done a lot of radio where it's like, oh, and it's a book about women's friendship set in a bra shop, and to some extent, I've played into that. Certainly I have, because, of course, you want your book to sell and you want readers. And on the other hand, it's just, are you compromising yourself? Can women's fiction not be taken seriously at all anymore? What does this kind of mean? And so basically just that sort of disconnect for me between what I thought I was writing and how it's been received has been fascinating.
Yeah. What did happen to Timna? Did she have an abortion?
I will honestly tell you that I don't know, and I never kind of asked myself that. Because Timna doesn't know, and that was the point of view I kind of maintained the whole time.
Yeah, I love that theme of how people can come into your life and play a redemptive role, but I mean, you can't idealize them as redeemers because it's just, that's not all they are.
That's right.
It's like, I'm sure the desire to be rescued or turned around or changed or reborn or reinvigorated, I mean, it's certainly one that I experience, and I'm sure it's a widely universal experience. How did that theme of redemption come to you, or is it something you thought about?
I guess I originally kind of began it. I originally sort of just had the setting of the bra shop, actually, before I had the characters, and then I sort of thought what would happen if I pictured a couple kind of both falling in love with this young assistant and watching her, and then that changing their relationship and opening their relationship up. And so that was sort of how it began. So redemption through sort of two people relating to another and then bonding over that relationship, basically. And then it was also way back in the beginning, casting Timna as an Israeli was interesting for me because, I'm an American Jew, and I grew up in a Zionist youth movement. I went to summer camp and learned all about Israel and did activities about, if you're, not if you're making Aliyah, when you make Aliyah, where will you make it to, and that sort of thing. It was the Habonim Dror movement, so it was left-wing socialist Zionist. And then when I was 18, I went and lived in Israel and was on a kibbutz, and I kind of realized that Israel, I think, for a lot of American Jews, and this isn't that original thought really, but it's sort of, it's the playground for American Jews, and you've got sort of some right-wing American Jews where Israel is, the machismo, and they're, kind of get to fulfill aggressive fantasies through visions of the Palestinian and Israeli conflict. But I think for an 18-year-old American Jew, they go there and they're looking like to have sex, basically, right? It's like you're in Israel, especially if you're a woman, the Israeli army guys and stuff. And so I sort of was curious, too, about the way that Americans, I think, sexualize Israelis, American Jews, that Israelis are our sexy other. But then, once Timnah really became a character, then I stopped thinking about that. But that was part of what I began with, too, when you talk about that kind of redemption, specifically that American-Jewish relationship to Israel.
This following question has nothing to do with your book, but I'll ask it because I can. What's the story of you and God?
I don't know. I don't know. That one's still being written. For a long time, I said I didn't believe in God, and I don't really believe in God, but I do think that there's something worth honoring beyond ourselves. And, I'm at births all the time, too, so I feel like I'm pretty engaged in... miracle sounds like such a cliche, but like you see, you're like the first hands touching a baby being born. It's an incredible place to be. So I'm still kind of figuring that one out. And figuring it out, especially now that I'm a mother, it's kind of, it's one thing to grow up Jewish and to kind of take that for granted, but then when you have kids, then you kind of have to figure out, well, what is Judaism going to look like for our family? We don't live in a Jewish place. I live in Victoria, British Columbia, so it's not like it's in the air here the way it would be if I was raising my kids in New York. So I feel like I have to actually think quite consciously about it. If they're going to think of themselves as Jewish, then that has to come from my husband and I. And so we're still kind of figuring all of this out, figuring it out, I think, yeah.
What do you miss and not miss about living in an area full of Jews?
Well, what do I miss and not miss? I had an experience, and I don't think I wrote about this on my blog. I don't want to be redundant with anything I wrote there. But I was flying to New York from Victoria, and there are no direct flights, of course, so I landed in Toronto, and then we got on the plane from Toronto going to New York. And I got on the plane, and I looked down the aisle of the airplane with, lots of people sitting there, and I thought, people on this plane look like me. And it was so strange because it was one of those just visceral, things that come to you, and I hadn't realized I was missing that. I hadn't known I wasn't feeling that, but suddenly I was like, there are Jews on this plane, and they look like me, and I don't see that in my daily life in Victoria. And then, of course, I said this to a friend of mine in Victoria who's half Japanese, and she was like, what are you talking about? Like, you just look white to me. Like, you don't look, like, what does that mean to look Jewish? She really was confused even. And I was like, it's just, but of course, when you're part of an ethnic group, the differentiations are more obvious. So that was something. And then I think, where I grew up also, I grew up in Flatbush, and so I grew up, the store in Simba's Undergarments for women, you don't go all the time to a bra shop, but I grew up going to stores with my mom where she knew the owners, where she had a relationship with them, where she cashed her checks. At the grocery store where they would pinch my cheeks or they'd give me cookies, and that doesn't have to be Jewish, but any ethnic community usually is where those sorts of things happen, and I definitely miss having something like that. It's quite anonymous where I am. And then there's sort of like the loudness and the banter, and so I miss that culture. I don't know that there's something specifically that I don't miss. At the same time, I don't want